to string together PK 3 of 4.
Rahal now 2 in a row in kart.
And Richmond his second double of the year.
This and more next on Speedweek.
Speedweek is brought to you by BF Goodrich TA Radials, built for you to take on the road. And by Dodge, a performance revolution, an American revolution.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Speedweek. I'm Larry Newber.
And I'm Bob Jenkins. The IndyCar, Winston Cup, and Formula One series all had repeat winners last weekend, but none of the winners was points leader, so the battle for championships in all 3 divisions is tightening up.
For most of this Formula One season, the World's Championship has been a revolutionary but refreshing on-track battle among 4. Last week's race was live here on ESPN. At one time, each of Nigel Mansell and Alain Prost had strung together 8-point finishes in a row. Nelson Piquet had a run of 4, and Ayrton Senna had tallied an 8 of 11 Grand Prix. But as the road to the championship narrows, it appears the winner might be the last of those 4 running, and not necessarily the swiftest. Perhaps this year's crown won't be won, but lost by 3 others. After last week's high-speed test in Monza, Italy, none of the Big 4 even has back-to-back finishes. Some of this race over before it began. The grid had no front row. Teo Fabi, Pole, and Prost had problems. Their races began from grid last and pits, respectively. Neither finished, and Senna pulverized a gearbox at the light. The Benettons were fast again, showing overwhelming straightaway speed. Bobby in front of the hometown fans was quickest, and Gerhard Berger was somehow squeezed to grid 4th. And although Berger led briefly, this would be an errorless race for the Williams-Honda twins. Ferrari in front of an adrenaline-pumping home crowd challenged this supremacy. Michele Alboreto was strong until this surprising bobble, and Stefan Johansson scored a face-saving, maybe ride-saving, 3rd. But despite 10 seconds longer in the pits, Piquet won for the 3rd time in the last 4. A jubilant teammate Mansell, didn't he get 2nd? Sees his teammate creep to 6 of his lead. Prost remains less than a win away, and Senna misses a significant shift. Bob, Prost was fined $5,000 for criticizing officials over a disputed black flag, but based on everything I know about the situation, I support him.
In other Formula One news, Didier Pironi is rumored to be the replacement for Jacques Laffite if Laffite cannot return to racing from injuries suffered in the British Grand Prix earlier this year. And McLaren designer John Bernard has confirmed that he's leaving that team to join Ferrari. In IndyCars, Bobby Rahal has started his late-season charge a little earlier this year, and it could mean a car championship. Rahal, who started 3rd, won his 2nd consecutive IndyCar race, and both kart races held this year outside the United States. Rick Mears put a Penske chassis powered by a Chevrolet Ilmor engine on the pole. That's the first time a non-Cosworth has been on pole since 1983. The race was only a few yards past the green when Dennis Firestone lost it in turn 1. Jacques Villeneuve, with our in-car camera, was also victimized. Firestone suffered a broken wrist and dislocated shoulder, but Gary Bettenhausen later took over the car. After this yellow and before the first series of pit stops, the racing was as good as anywhere the past few years. Mears, Kevin Kogan, Michael Andretti, Mario, and Rahal were wheel-to-wheel in a tremendous duel for several laps. The lead changed hands several times. Kogan tried for it, but smoked the tires and fell all the way to 4th. This family feud resulted in a missing front wing for Michael as he tried to nose past Dad. Roberto Guerrero led a while, but was then involved in a 3rd turn skirmish with Johnny Rutherford, who was held for a while at the infield hospital. Mario also had a wing torn off after touching Derek Daly on a restart. Allenzer Jr. made a quick pit stop under yellow and picked up a full lap. Kart showed him the leader for several laps, but then, after minutes of consultation, Rahal is waved by the pace car. And shortly thereafter, Little Al is held in the pits to correct the error. Rahal cruised to his 4th win of 1986. That's twice as many victories as any other driver. And it puts him in a tie for the lead in kart points with Mr. Consistency, Al Jr., who hasn't won yet. Sullivan is 3rd. Father and son, the Andrettis, tied for 4th. The 8-race Canadian Challenge Players Series, all IROC Camaros and Trans Am Firebirds, ironically assembled near Cincinnati, Ohio. 5-liter dynamos topped off with what the French Canadians call les quadrujets, 4 barrels.
Here's a classic way to produce a new winner. In the 6 previous, Canada's Mr. Everything, Richard Spenard, and Robin Buck had all the wins. But when outside front rower Guy McKenzie lost it, Spenard and Buck were among the victims. New winner ordained, the divine appointee, Spenard's fellow instructor and teammate Ron Fellows, though he waited until the last lap to pass Claude Aubin.
Race number 7 in the Canadian Formula 2000 Series completed the San Air card. This was the second time at this track for the series, but it's the only oval in the series. Spenard is points leader, having won 5 of 6 events, but he'll not finish in the top 5 today. The other winner this year, Stuart Crow, will finish 4th. In turn 2 on the final lap, Paul Tracy passes Brian Malcolm for the lead, and Malcolm holds off the challenge at the finish line of Alan LaBrosse.
Up next, for some, Richmond is a just barely solo but smashing experience.
For others, the harsh reality of a crushing crowd. Darrell Waltrip's effort to catch Winston Cup points leader Dale Earnhardt faltered Sunday, while Tim Richmond's got a boost. The 400-lap race around the Richmond, Virginia Fairgrounds half mile saw Harry Gant on the pole for the second time this year and Waltrip alongside. But Waltrip finished last in this race when the transmission let go on the 61st circuit. No Winston Cup points. The race did see 19 lead changes among 12 drivers, among them Richard Petty. He narrowly missed Morgan Shepherd's spinning car early, and then later almost became involved in this Tommy Ellis maneuver, but Richard finished 4th. Tim Richmond in number 25 had handling and other problems early. In fact, here he goes a lap down under green. Winston Cup newcomer Ron Shepherd brought out one of the yellows, and during this caution period, Tim got his lap back. Ken Schrader also hit the wall about 3/4 of the way through the race. Despite cleanup efforts, the racetrack is slick with oil, and leader Rusty Wallace slides into the first turn wall, and Ricky Rudd, who had also led, also crashed and called it quits. Terry Labonte suffered a similar fate just 21 laps from the checkered. All of this put Tim Richmond in the lead, and he went on to win his 6th race in the last 12 outings. Earnhardt passed Morgan Shepherd late for 2nd, and the Richmond-Earnhardt 1-2 finish has really tightened the Winston Cup points. Just 12 races ago, Tim was tied for 10th in the standings, but now he's only 118 behind Dale. Waltrip drops to 3rd with the Richmond shutout. Bobby Allison is 4th, and Elliott, who is 9th at Richmond, is 5th.
Dale Earnhardt began the Grand National late model year, winning the season's first 2 races at Daytona and Rockingham. Until Darlington 2 weeks ago, he hadn't won again. Now he has his season's 2nd Snake Eyes, 2 in a row. Thomas Brothers drivers from the last 2 years occupied the front row, Jimmy Hensley and Brett Bodine. Bodine wrestles into first at green, but it wasn't too long before fast approaching traffic gets snarled. Undaunted, demonstrative Dale not only soon is knocking at the door, but burst through. The tight Richmond half-mile next caught up Bodine, who's among this, as well as Hensley. Then on lap 63 of the 200, this rugby-like scrim also stopped the race for guardrail repairs. Local Elton Sawyer, a rising star among the leaders, but Dale has an iron heart, among other things. And late here, moving around Tommy Houston, while Larry Pearson leads Dale Jarrett through 2. Sawyer will get 2nd, and Jack Ingram, of course, is almost the foregone points championship winner.
7-Eleven has decided not to sponsor Kyle Petty's Winston Cup car again next year, but Kenny Schrader has signed again with Junie Donlevy and Red Baron Pizza.
It's not Monza or Indianapolis, and the people have their own rough and ready style, but Eldora's World 100, part of the broad spectrum of auto racing.
It's just, they seem to have the biggest crowd and more race cars than any other short track event in the United States for stock cars, and this one right here.
Over 150 entries from almost 20 states plus Australia, and more people than you can count at a short track. And almost anything goes.
You know, we run quite a bit of stagger compared to everybody else, and we got our Champ Dirt Car tail in there to give us 70 gallons of fuel compared to these guys running 32, but they have to run gasoline and I get to run methanol.
Just making the 24-car grid an enormous accomplishment. Earl Baldus recognizes this with $1,000 to start, and the $19,000 first prize, as much as many of these competitors make working in a year. Ohio's John Mason, the early leader, then a pileup took him, Charlie Schwartz, Rodney Franklin, and more from contention. When the smoke cleared, Tennessee's Jeff Purvis won his 3rd World 100 in the last 4 years, a total equaled only by Moore.
Bad luck early for the team of former IndyCar driver Tom Bagley and Jim Gahary turned into good luck later at the IMSA showroom stock race at Road America Sunday. Their bad luck came on the way to Elkhart Lake when the driver of their van went off the road outside Chicago, flipped, and damaged their Porsche 944. But they won the 484-mile race, giving Porsche its first win of the season in the series. The sports division was won by the team of Ray Corman, Ron Christensen, and John Andretti in their BMW, the fourth win for them this season.
Coming up, turn 1 is too much at the Hut in Indiana.
While the last lap is just enough in Connecticut.
Every division has its shining star event, and in midgets, you're hard-pressed to find a prize more coveted than a win in the Hut 100. Gary Lee reports.
Sunshine and cool temperatures greeted race fans for the 34th running of the Hut 100. Action began early in the preliminaries as Jim Bradford, winner of the last chance race, flipped on the first lap of the semi. Bradford was unhurt. Later in the semi, Lars Lean in 97 flipped, with Palmer Crowell in 26 getting tangled up. Neither driver was hurt. Once the green flag flew over the main event, 11 rows of 3 funneled into the first turn, with pole sitter Kevin Olson taking the lead over Mike Gregg, Joe Corrigan, and Jerry Russell. But the best drive was coming from the middle of the pack as 5-time Hut champion Rich Vogler began 14, but was up to second by lap 5. Vogler and Olson continued their battle throughout the first half of the race. On lap 72, the yellow flew when Ronnie Berg stopped on the track. But as the field moved through 3 for a restart, 5 cars tangled, with Ron Roberts rolling over and bringing out the red flag. Most of the leaders changed tire compounds and also made some other chassis adjustments. When the race resumed, Vogler grabbed the lead in the third turn and began to pull away. By lap 85, Vogler had a straightaway advantage over Olson, Gregg, Bigelow, Clark, and Lotshaw. But Bigelow had found the cushion in 3 and 4 and was on the move. Tom was up to second with 12 laps to go. Late in the contest, Mike Gregg lost the Cosworth engine going down the backstretch, and Brian Holderfield brought out the yellow on lap 97. But USAC has a 2-lap green rule. So as they took the white flag, it was Vogler, Bigelow, Olson, Lotshaw, and Clark. But the shootout would be between Vogler and Bigelow.
When I got the white flag coming off the fourth corner, I heard a car up on top, and I thought, well, it's probably Tom Bigelow, because he's one of the old-time experienced drivers, and I knew there would be a top sometime. However, it seemed like it came in a little bit for Bigelow, but not enough.
For Speedweek, I'm Gary Lee.
Vogler lost the USAC Regional Midget Championship at the Indianapolis Speedrome last Thursday night. He needed a second-place finish, but was passed by Steve Lotshaw and Mel Kenyon on the last lap and finished 4th. The race and the series championship was won by Mac McClellan, his second title. He was also champ in 1981.
The World of Outlaws are on their Pacific Challenge Tour. Sammy Swindell won twice last week, his 10th and 11th victories of the year, and in his career, the 119th and 120th.
The Winston 300, one of the NASCAR modified division's richest races of the year at Thompson, Connecticut Speedway. One early favorite, George Kent, went up in smoke. Jamie Tomeno found himself mowing grass in addition to racing. Bob Park may have been helped a bit by Brett Bodine in this encounter. And this is Ken Bouchard losing a right rear under yellow, but he replaces it and finishes 3rd. Mike McLaughlin in number 12 passes Carl Pasteryak with 20 laps to go for 2nd place. Then Jim Spencer in number 24, who spun halfway through the event, passes McLaughlin for the lead with 8 laps to go. Despite a late yellow, Spencer holds off the challenge, collects $12,000, and gets a kiss from the trophy girl.
In our next segment, Mark up another win in drags.
While the big score is off-road and a big tally in bikes. Stay with us. RAET record of 7.216 and a new track record of 194.3 miles an hour during qualifying at Rockingham last weekend, but then broke in the first round. The Pro Stock Finals pitted Ricky Smith in the left lane against Roy Hill. Both from North Carolina, both in Fords, and the second straight IHRA meet that Smith beats Hill, although Hill turns in a faster speed. Bunny Burkett's pink Chrysler Laser was top qualifier and went into the finals against Bogey Kell. Bunny virtually clinched the Pro Alcohol Funny Car Championship with her 3rd national win this year. Raymond Beadle ended a 2-year retirement, although he has been competing on the West Coast for the past couple of months, getting ready for this. He made it to the Funny Car Finals against Mark Oswald. But Oswald keeps it straight while Raymond nearly crosses the line Oswald is the IHRA Funny Car Champ for '86.
Somewhere between road racing and drag racing and dirt racing is off-road racing. Score race last week. Dan Hubbard reports.
193 vehicles took the green flag, competing for $400,000 in prize and contingency money in the 5th annual High Desert Racing Association Frontier 500, contested in the desert outside Las Vegas, Nevada. The racers had 18 hours to complete the 4-lap, 444-mile event in the 106-degree heat. And when it was all over, only 68 of the starters had crossed the finish line. The race churned through the roughest area the Southwest has to offer. The winner's circle turned into a family affair, with Rob Gordon Jr. and co-driver Butch Arciero in their Chenoweth Magnum edging out Gordon Sr. for the overall victory. This is Dan Hubbard reporting on the Frontier 500 from Las Vegas, Nevada.
Defending AMA Camel Pro champion Bubba Schobert achieved 2 milestones Sunday at Syracuse. He clinched the championship for 1986 and becomes the first repeat champion since Jay Springsteen in 1977. And in winning on the mile, he tied Joe Leonard's record of 8 national wins in a single season. Bubba led from start to finish in the 25-lap event. Ted Booty passed Ricky Graham on the last lap for second, while Ricky slowed with a leaking rear tire. Schobert found the going easy.
Well, I kept an eye on the times, you know, from the practice and time trials, and I knew I was going a little bit faster than the guys, so I thought if I could break away early, I had a chance of doing that, but not nearly that far, though.
With 3 races remaining, Bubba has a good shot at beating Leonard's record.
Suspension on an IndyCar is the subject of this week's Bernstein Report, brought to you by Budweiser.
Today on the Bernstein File, we're going to bring you from Indianapolis at an IndyCar shop pull rod suspension on an IndyCar. This is the pull rod I'm speaking of, attached to the top of the upper wishbone, down to the base and the bottom of the shock absorber and the spring. As I remove this panel, you'll see the top of the shock, which this rod activates. As the car is traveling down the racetrack and the suspension moves the wheel up and down on the concrete or asphalt surface, this rod pulls and activates the shock and spring to make it keep contact with the ground. It is independent. The other side may be doing the same thing as it so wishes. One other point to make here is that you'll notice it's all enclosed inside the body, allowing the aerodynamic airflow not to be disturbed so the air can push back and go to the tunnel, keeping the car glued to the ground.
Now here's this week's trivia question. The record for the most Hut 100 wins in a row is 4. Who holds it? A. Tony Bettenhausen, B. A.J. Foyt, C. Bob Tattersall, D. Rich Vogler, or E. Pancho Carter? I'll have the answer in a moment. Here's the answer to this week's trivia question. Incredibly, in the 34-year history of the race, only 1 driver has won more than 2. Each of those listed has 2 wins, but D. Rich Vogler is in the midst of the hottest streak ever, harvesting the last 4 in a row and 6 of the most recent 9.
ESPN's Formula One racing is often live, and some non-racing aficionados might consider the Sunday 9 a.m. Eastern Time less than convenient, but sometimes it's downright cruel, Rick DeBrule reports.
Mid-afternoon at Monza, Italy means sunrise in Phoenix, Arizona. So if you're one of the Formula One devoted and want to watch the races, it means getting up real early. Usually a lonely affair, the Arizona region of the Sports Car Club of America decided to make it a social event, complete with widescreen TVs and breakfast.
Why did you get up this early to come down here and watch this race?
I keep asking myself that.
Billed as croissants with Keiki or donuts with Derek, in this Tot's case, it was more like Similac with Senna.
I've been to Long Beach a couple of times. We've been to Watkins Glen when that was still Formula One. Of course, it was rather hard at 4:45 this morning.
Also in attendance, a Phoenix City councilman who was heading a committee to bring a major street race to town.
The interest is certainly here in Phoenix. There's no question about it. Several members of the committee have had opportunities to travel around and see some of the races, Formula One races in Detroit and Long Beach, and kart races, and mostly street races that have been going on.
It might not have been the same thing as being there, but in this case, at least they kept each other awake. In Phoenix, I'm Richard Brohl reporting for Speedweek.
Next week on Speedweek, Winston Cup at Dover, Trans Am at Mossport, and the Hoosier 100 Dirt Car Race from Indianapolis. I'm Bob Jenkins.
And I'm Larry Newberry. We'll see you next week. We leave you this week with more from the Winston Cup race at Richmond.
Speedweek has been brought to you by B.F. Goodrich TA Radials, built for you to take on the road.